I am here with Wade. Super, super excited to have you, man. We're going to be diving a lot into, of course, mindset and performance, but definitely I want to learn more about your journey as well. Going from ex-addict to all of a sudden being the president of 10X Health or ex-president of 10X Health and starting your own businesses and starting your own apps and how that actually came about. So super excited to have you. For everyone who doesn't know who you are, I guess I'll let you take the ball and kind of tell them a little bit about yourself.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Mo. I appreciate it. Looking forward to chatting with you for sure. I started off in sales. I've been in sales and finance and really studied sales, marketing, finance my whole life. Sports were my life, and I got an injury playing hockey, and then further that injury, wakeboarding, was prescribed painkillers, and found my way into addiction of Oxycontin pretty quick. I was lucky enough to hit rock bottom through that, and then a few years later diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder that nobody could really figure out, and they told me I'd be on medication the rest of my life. And those two journeys led me into first sobriety, overcoming drug addiction, and then secondly overcoming my autoimmune disorder through non-traditional medicine led me into functional and preventative medicine, more holistic approach, really diving deep into nutrition and how my body and liver worked, understanding more about fitness, mindset, anxiety, stress, mindfulness, and even stoicism. A lot of those teachings really helped me. And so I went from a closed-minded sales guy who was an addict to having to overcome a couple big things, which put me on this personal development journey. And then when COVID happened, I decided that I was going to utilize what I had learned, and I was going to turn that passion into, overcoming what I had overcome into a career. And I ended up in functional medicine. And over a 3-year period of time, I really just worked 17, 18 hours a day, and I got as much information and knowledge as I possibly could from the top minds. And I'll kind of dive into like how I did that. But I just consulted for so many doctors and I got so much information from them. I taught myself medicine in 3 years, and we put together a system that would help a patient in functional preventative medicine, with their best interests in mind, helping them optimize and live as long as possible, but at the same time, creating a business that was able to grow and scale. And mixing medicine and business that's private pay and not, insurance based is a very difficult task, especially doing that across the United States with all the different legislation state to state. And so I was lucky enough to make a lot of mistakes and learn from them, from COVID on. And I scaled some hormone clinics, and then I got a call from 10X, and it was as if I had been preparing for 2 years for that role. As the president, and again, happy to dive deep into that as we discussed, but it was the perfect synergy. I've been following Gary Brecka for a long time. I love the guy's teachings. I think he's just phenomenal and a brilliant mind in the industry. We met up, and then I was able to meet up with Brandon Dawson, Grant's business partner, and it was just a match made in heaven right away. And so that was an incredible experience.
Lots to unpack there.
Yeah.
So I'll try to take it one at a time. So in terms of addiction, let's cover that first. Going through the Oxycontin addiction, what was the first steps you took to start to overcome that in itself? And what can other people do who are going through addiction? Because as you know, working with business owners, a lot of them, if it's not Oxycontin, they'll have other sedations, right? Whether it's through distractions, social media, pornography, drinking, smoking, whatever it is. So what were some practical steps you took to start to overcome that addiction?
I think you hit the nail on the head. It actually doesn't matter what the drug of choice is, what the vice is. It doesn't matter what somebody's utilizing to fulfill themselves. An addiction's an addiction. And the solution to the problem is actually what someone uses, whether it be porn or drugs or alcohol. That is the solution. And for a period of time, it works. It distracts them. It takes their mind. It alleviates and quiets their mind. And that solution works until it stops working, until the addiction becomes so bad that it consumes you. and it leaves you unfulfilled, empty, unable to be a participating member in, your family and your relationships and your business. For me, Oxycontin was really like the most addictive drug that I've ever tried. And I had no idea how addicting it was going to be. I got to a point where I couldn't function without it. The thing was, when I had it, and this was really the problem, I was able to function at a very high level. I was a financial advisor, and before that I was running a bank, a commercial loan office at a bank, and I was on like 5 Oxycontin 80s a day. So I was like, honestly, I was feeling like Bradley Cooper in Limitless. Like when I had Oxycontin, unlike most people, it's a downer. It makes you pretty tired and quiet. For me, it made me incredibly focused and energetic. I have sort of a reverse personality when it comes to drugs. And so I thought that it was okay that I was doing this because I was functioning and performing at a high level, until it got so bad that when I was without it, I was having these crazy withdrawals. My girlfriend left me, my family stopped talking to me, my friends gave up on me. I started doing really shady things. And so at that time, this is when I was about 24, I just hit this place where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm empty, and I am super addicted to this. And actually at the time I called my parents, who I wasn't speaking with, and just told them, hey, I'm addicted to Oxycontin. I need to do something about it. And they sent me off to a 30-day rehab, which was great. I think for me, it was a good foundation to get some time and some space in between the people and places that I was spending my time with. And so I had that 30 days, and then I stayed another 15, which was like a transitory period. And I got introduced to AA. And a lot of people think like, hey, AA is just for, alcoholics. I think it's a really strong 12-step program that can help you overcome whatever it is you're dealing with, whatever kind of drugs and alcohol you're dealing with. For me, I just found the best solution in AA. But that for me was a really good start. Whenever you are addicted to something, it's very difficult to put the substance or the theme or the vice down and have your life get better after a period of time. Like initially you might go through this pink cloud of like, okay, I've put this vice down and I'm starting to feel better, but your brain is maladjusted to life because it has been relying upon a certain vice or a certain substance for a period of time. And when it's without it, the fear and the self-talk and the anxiety and the addiction start to really kick in. And at least for me, I found myself in this mental knot really often, just irritable and unable to manage life. And so for me, the only way I could possibly rearrange my thinking in my brain to be less maladjusted to life was to go through a 12-step program, was to do work on myself through a self-analysis and development with another person of like how my brain works and how I can start to alleviate some of my response to life through action, not through thinking. And so for me, that was a 12-step program, which is really the foundation of my sobriety for sure.
That's incredible. So for me, the biggest lesson I'm taking from this, and anybody who's listening to this, is remove yourself from the environments in which you're often in the place of addiction. For you, you went to rehab, but also having a support group, having people that you can learn from and be surrounded with. In this case, it was your 12-step program, because as they say, your problems weren't created in social isolation, so you can't get out of them in social isolation. So I would like to switch gears. You overcome the addiction. Now you're starting to feel better about yourself. And then the autoimmune issues kick in. Where do you go from there?
Yeah. So, a couple of years later, I was, at the time I was a financial advisor, and I was also doing life insurance. And so I decided that I was going to get some whole life insurance as a covered asset strategy, as an investment vehicle, because I was young. And all of my friends got super ultra preferred ratings. And I was, at the time, I thought I was the healthiest, I thought I was the biggest specimen out of all of them. I get my blood work back and they say declined, not even like a rated status, on health insurance, but declined altogether. I'm like, oh my gosh,
Wow.
how is this possible? And they say, you actually need to see a hepatologist or a gastroenterologist. And so I did. And they said, your liver enzymes are 4 times elevated. And it looks like you have potentially cirrhosis of the liver, but we don't know. So we're going to do some testing, and they for a while they couldn't actually figure out what I had, and then they say, hey, you have a rare autoimmune disorder that we see prevalent in young girls, and it's hereditary. And they said, look, your only options are a steroid, prednisone, and an immunosuppressant, azathioprine. You're going to be on these for the rest of your life. And the prednisone is going to have terrible side effects, and the azathioprine is going to increase your risk of cancer, skin cancer down the line. And I was like, okay, well, what else can I do? And they said, nothing. And I said, no, come on, like what like anything else? Like, what about nutrition? Did my drug addiction or my binge drinking in college, did any of that cause this? Nope, nope, nope. What about different exercise patterns or, anything? They said, no, absolutely not. And so I saw 3 other specialists. They all told me the exact same thing. And at the time I was like a little frustrated because I was starting to have, this is like 3-4 months in, I'm on the medication. I'm starting to have really bad side effects from the prednisone. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to start reading. And I had never really read at that time. I was just a closed-minded sales guy who thought I knew everything. And I started reading books on the liver and autoimmune disorders and how the body functions. And what I came to find out was, regardless of what they diagnosed me with, there was definitely things that I could do to make my liver work less hard and stop causing so much inflammation in my body. So I started changing my diet. I started removing sugar, all the processed food, all the fried foods. There was no more puff bars or cigarettes. I started making these lifestyle choices. I started eating smaller portions. I started exercising more regularly, like planned workouts instead of just sports. And then I started getting glutathione injections. And then I met a functional doctor sort of by chance, and he told me about these things called exosomes. It's a molecule secreted by a stem cell. So I started to get these injections in my glute and intravenously. And miraculously, in about 6 to 8 months, my liver enzymes were completely stable, 100% normal. Back to my traditional doctors, my gastro and HEPA, and said, how are we doing here in the blood work? They reviewed it with me. They said, wow, this is incredible that you've responded so well to the medication. We can cut down on the amount, on the dose. And I said, I've been off that medication for 4 months now. And they're like, no way. We just prescribed it to you, like 8 months ago. And I was like, yeah. I decided to take things into my own hands, and here's what I found. And at the time I was so angry with them. I went on like this tirade of education to educate them about what I had done. And it kind of fell on deaf ears, and, I had this resentment against them, but I realized, like, that's just the way the medical system is set up. It's not their fault. Like they can't prescribe a lot of the functional medicine that I did, and they don't really have nutrition education in school. It's not a part of their program. And so, I still would see them once in a while to make sure everything was under control. But I said, wow, if I had these issues, and I overcame it through this path and this journey, there's got to be a lot of other people like this. And so it was still, another couple of years before I ended up in that industry. But that's really how I overcame, my autoimmune was exercise, diet, glutathione, and exosomes. It's key for me.
That's crazy, man. That's insane that they just told you, oh, this is hereditary. We don't know what's going on. Here's the Band-Aid fix. And then there's actual real solutions to it.
Unfortunately, the medical system isn't set up for, it's not set up to help people live optimally and be preventative. It's like if someone has diabetes, the doctor actually can prescribe them, or help them with a $375 solution to completely eliminate or mitigate that. And then they have to make their own, lifestyle changes through diet. Or they can put them on medications that'll cost over the lifetime of the patient like $700,000. What are you going to do? You know what I mean? Like 375 or 700,000. And also, like, you haven't studied the treatment outline for that $375 fix. You just know what the insurance companies will let you prescribe. And those insurance companies are lobbied by Big Pharma, and Big Pharma controls traditional medicine. So it's just kind of the way the system is set up, unfortunately.
That's wild. So I want to talk more about when you became the president of 10X and what you learned at your time there of diving deeper into health, diving deeper into fitness and biological optimization. Because I was talking to one of my friends recently, and he said this quote, and I loved it. He said, if you ask a healthy man what he wants in his life, he'll name you a million things. But if you ask a sick man what he wants, there's just one thing, which is health. And that is true wealth, in my opinion. And I think in everyone, if you become sick, that is what you want. You want to be healthy. So at your time at 10X, what were the biggest things that you learned that someone can take to start becoming healthier today, a month from now, 6 months from now, 12 months from now?
What you just said is incredibly true. And, I felt the same thing with my autoimmune, and then with some intestinal issues that left me unable to work, with crazy anxiety, and so I just remember thinking, like, man, all I want to do is be healthy and nothing else matters at that point. This whole journey has gone in steps, overcoming addiction, overcoming autoimmune. Then I had these really bad intestinal issues where I found I had a bacteria in my stomach. And I've gotten healthier over time and more dialed in. What I found was, number one, any processed food, any fried food was causing major inflammation in my body. And I didn't know how to measure inflammation, but I know today that through a simple blood test, there's a biomarker called homocysteine, and that's a measure of inflammation within one's body. And we can actually see how much inflammation we have in our body. And when I first took that blood test, when I wasn't eating very healthy, it was through the roof. That was when I was heavy on soda and processed food, fried food. My diet was terrible. And look, I got to say this, like, I won the genetic lottery for sure, because I used to eat whatever I wanted and still look, pretty much in shape. And I mean, like, large pepperoni pizzas with ranch and a 2-liter of Coke and a pint of Ben and Jerry's ice cream. And I was just kind of unhealthy. I used to eat sausage, egg, and cheese McGriddle at McDonald's every single morning with a hash brown and an orange juice. Like, just very, very unhealthy. What I found is those foods were really hurting me. And sometimes they didn't hurt me in the moment, but they were hurting me long term. The other thing I found too is sugar was really problematic for me. And I was afraid to quit sugar altogether because, I love sugar. It's very addicting, but I needed to be able to manage it a little bit better. And so what I found was having sugar first thing in the morning on an empty stomach is terrible. Like, even if I wake up and have blueberries and fruit, like, for me, horrible. And for most people, really should be avoided. Getting some protein in the morning, or even a little bit of carbs, much better than putting sugar directly in. The reason is, when we have nothing in our stomach, it just goes directly into our bloodstream. There's nothing for it to absorb into. And so our blood sugar spikes very quickly, and then we have an insulin response, and then we have to create energy and insulin. And it's just very difficult on our body. We know that one of the keys to longevity, to extending one's life, is maintaining a stable blood glucose. And how do we do that? Well, we don't jam a bunch of sugar in first thing in the morning. If we're going to do it, maybe it'll be on a full stomach after a meal. And if we have a big meal and a blood glucose spike, go for a 10-minute walk. But we want to create a consistent blood glucose level. That's really helpful. One of the biggest game changers in anything for me was, instead of sugar, instead of food, or instead of coffee first thing in the morning, I put it's called an LMNT electrolyte packet. It's sodium, magnesium, potassium. It's in the right ratio. There's no sugar. I dump that into a bottle of water and I drink that first. So I'm getting hydrated. I used to drink 12 bottles of water a day, and I was clinically dehydrated because I didn't have any sodium or electrolytes in my diet, or that I was drinking. So I wasn't retaining anything. I was just, peeing it out, and it looked like I was dehydrated, and I actually felt dehydrated. Once I started doing these LMNT packets to start my day, complete game changer. And then I would push coffee out, a little bit further, and no sugar in my coffee. So starting my day with those things, and then, eating some protein and carbs, is like the foundation of starting to be, a little bit healthier.
Love that. So for someone who is a sugar addict, because I love sugar, like, that is one thing that I've battled for a very long time, and it's gotten pretty good, but still there's times where it comes up. What would you recommend to them to start to overcome the sugar cravings?
Start with that LMNT packet first thing in the morning. When you start with something salty, it'll actually reduce your craving for sugar. And that was the key to be able to have less sugar cravings, was starting with that packet. Don't put sugar in your coffee. It might be gross. You might not like it. Just don't do it. Third is start reading labels. If anything you're eating says no sugar, you should be more concerned than if it has sugar. And I'll tell you why. There are 3 ingredients that are 600 times more addictive, 600 times sweeter than your typical sugar. It's sucralose, dextrose, and aspartame. And these 3 were responsible for the majority of the inflammation in my body. Cutting those 3 out is what most drastically helped me eliminate my autoimmune disorder. Those are the absolute devil, and they are in everything. So when you see no sugar, be on high alert, because it probably has one of those kind of sweeteners in it. If it doesn't, then there's really only 2, maybe 3, sweeteners that are okay. And they are stevia leaf extract, so far as we can see, and monk fruit sweetener. Those 2 are totally fine. Now, organic cane sugar is way better than these, dextrose, sucralose, aspartame. Organic coconut sugar, same deal, better than the artificial sweeteners. For me, what I did, and I still have sugar, I just make sure that it's in the afternoon or in the evening, and I do it in the form generally of maple syrup and honey. That's usually what I do. I have oatmeal with a raw honey, a little banana, and some salt, or I'll have something else with some maple syrup in it. I try to stick to those. Those have been very helpful. But when I do it on a full stomach, it's not quite causing the same reaction. 2 is eating protein. Most people are not eating enough protein. They go throughout the day, and since they're not getting enough protein, a lot of these carbs or empty type of foods are making them feel hungry again. And so when we eat sugar, it's like this vicious cycle. So when we eat the sugar early in the morning, we start to feel hungry, and then we don't get enough protein. Just eat more protein and your sugar cravings will go down. And then third is get some exercise in the morning. If you can follow a consistent routine and go for a walk, or get your endorphins pumping, it'll reduce the cravings for sugar all day long.
Love that. I always thought no sugar was better for you. I even have Diet Coke downstairs for that reason. And now you're saying it's 600 times worse.
Unfortunately, Diet Coke has it has I think it has aspartame and
Aspartame,
unfortunately, it's actually worse. Honestly, you're better off drinking regular Coke than Diet Coke. No joke. I know that sucks to hear, but it's true.
Wow. So you go through these steps these are what we would consider basic steps to become a healthier person. What are the steps that you would take from there, I guess, to be a little bit more advanced? What are the more advanced things that you can do?
There's a bunch. I think reading the labels is really important. Look, there's this one other ingredient that I would highly recommend staying away from, and it looks like it's healthy because it's B12. Now, there's a few different types of B12. One's called hydrocobalamin, one's methylcobalamin, and those are totally fine. The other one is called cyanocobalamin. This is a cyanide-based version of B12. And you might say, well, how are food makers putting cyanide, a chemical, into our food? Well, there's toxicity limits for the FDA, so they say because it's such a small amount that it's not that bad. But when you start off with a liquid IV packet in the morning, and then something else that has cyanocobalamin, and then a Kind bar. If you look, it's like, oh my gosh, the Kind bar isn't healthy at all. It's actually complete garbage. And so there's a lot of these healthy products that are not healthy at all. And you start to stack up the cyanocobalamin throughout the day, and that also causes crazy inflammation in your body. So that's another thing that you really want to stay away from. So those 3 artificial sweeteners, cyanocobalamin, stay away from those. The next step is, first off, how do we get enough oxygen into our body? We wake up in an oxygen deprived state. Unless we hit a workout or do some breath work, we're not really getting as much oxygen as we should. We know that the presence of oxygen is the absence of disease, and it's very difficult for degenerative conditions and disease to exist in a hyperoxygenated state. And so if we can get enough oxygen, we're going to put ourselves in a much better position. One way to do that and really to drive the oxygen in is start off with breath work immediately. You can do a Wim Hof or, several other techniques. And then, this might sound a little earthy, but getting your shoes off and going for a walk outside and grounding to reduce the charge and getting that first sunlight. That first hour of sunlight doesn't have the UV radiation in it. It has the positive effects of the light, which can help drive whatever oxygen you just oxygenated into a deeper level into your cells. There's more advanced techniques to doing that through, a PEMF, a pulse electromagnetic frequency mat. You lay on the mat, and then you put an oxygen mask on, and then you hop in a red light bed. That's a more, expensive way to do that. But by doing some breath work, grounding, and getting first light, that's a really, really positive way, to be healthy during the day. From there, it's diagnostics. It's looking at a methylated genetic test. It's looking at a blood test and starting to see how your body is processing what you put into it, how your hormone levels are, your liver, adrenal, thyroid functionality. And once you have those results, working with a functional or preventative doctor to make the necessary changes to be as healthy as possible and eliminate, or at least reduce the chance of disease and degenerative conditions.
Gotcha. So doing the diagnostics basically comes at the end, not at the start, whereas most people think it comes at the start.
So we worked with 10,000 patients over my time in the 4.5 years in the space. Here's the thing, no matter what you take. So if let's say you take a methylated genetic test, which tells you the gene breaks you have in your methylation cycle, and it tells you should take these customized supplements, that's really the best place to start. And it's amazing what that can do for your health. And then taking a blood test and taking the recommendations, those things are great. But the reason that I talk about the foundation of exercise, nutrition, and some of the oxygenation techniques is because outside of a doctor prescribing you functional and preventative medicine, you still have 24 hours in a day where you're by yourself making your own choices. And a lot of the degeneration is these daily choices you're making of not exercise, being sedentary, smoking, eating like crap. And so we can't fix that. Like, we could prescribe hormones and the right supplements and the right, food groups or the right medication. But if someone's not willing to take control of their own health, it's kind of a moot point. And so that's why I say, get the foundation of proper diet, exercise, and oxygenation, and also take the genetic test and the blood test. But yeah, that would be the progression, I would say.
I love that. So what foods would you avoid in general? You mentioned the sweeteners, the fake sweeteners, of course, the fake B12, the cyanide B12.
Yep.
What other things would you avoid on top of that, or that people should look out for?
Look, anything with a lot of ingredients is usually not great for you. The less ingredients, for the most part, the better it's going to be. And so I stick with as many whole foods as humanly possible. And look, there's so much back and forth about whether a vegan diet is right, or keto, or Mediterranean, or paleo, or carnivore. Ultimately, eating whole foods, whether it's vegetables or meat or poultry, that's going to be a much better source of vitamins and nutrients than any processed food. I don't eat anything processed. I really do my very best to stay away from any of that kind of stuff. So having a foundation in one's diet can be really helpful. And for certain people that, that could look different. But I would just say, look, stay away from any processed packaged food, stay away from the fried food, as good as it might taste and as good as it might be. And then if you really want to get deep and go to the next level, wear a blood glucose monitor for 30 days, a levels blood glucose monitor. I wore the thing for 30 days just to get some information about my body. And what I saw was bread and potatoes just completely spike my blood glucose. And so I try and limit those. If I'm going to have, look, if I'm at Prime Italian and that cheesy bread comes out, like that's one thing is very hard to say no to, you know. I mean, it is, if anyone hasn't gone to Prime Italian in Miami and that cheesy bread comes out, like you could eat the whole thing and not even touch your dinner. It's that delicious. But I'll have a little piece of that because it's just that good. That's like my one little cheat, but I'll make it a very small piece so I don't have a crazy reaction. If I'm going to have like pasta, I mean, I'm a pasta snob. So if it's like a handmade pasta, sure, I'll have a small dish of it, but any box pasta or restaurant pasta, like no way. And then potatoes, since I have the data now, would have very, you know, a minimal amount of them, or I just, you know, stick to sweet potatoes. But so it's understanding your body for sure. But I think, like I said, staying away from fried food and processed food is the biggest thing.
What's some supplements people should avoid?
Well, that's a good question. Here's the key. The supplements that people should avoid are general recommendations about supplements from anybody. And what I mean is this: just because a certain supplement is right for me doesn't mean it's right for you. And when I started on this journey, I was probably taking 20 different supplements, and these supplements were recommendations from the top minds in the industry. I'm talking Huberman, Sinclair, like people that are revered, and what they're saying is spot on. And it's very true. These are very useful supplements, but supplementing for the sake of supplementing isn't going to do anything. Like they might recommend vitamin D3 and K2 because the majority of Americans are deficient in vitamin D3. Guess what? My vitamin D levels are through the roof naturally because I walk in the sun every morning, and you know, I just have a high vitamin D level. I don't need any extra vitamin D. And so what I was able to do by taking this methylated genetic test was, and 10X really has the best one. And I don't say that because I work there, but I've taken a bunch of other, you know, genetic tests, and they all don't give you much actionable data. The methylated test will show you, hey, here's your gene breaks in these 5 genes, and based on that, here's your vitamin deficiencies, and here's what you should be taking. So I went from like 20 supplements every morning to today I only take 5 because I'm taking what's specific to the gene breaks in my methylation cycle. And a methylation cycle is how your body converts anything you put into it. So imagine like if an oil company is drilling oil out of the ground, and then they have to refine that crude oil to turn it into gasoline so that you can put it in your car so your car will go. Same thing with your body. You eat some food, your body does not use that food as energy or a fuel source until it gets methylated or refined into its usable form. Now, if you have a gene break in that methylation cycle, your body's not going to optimally process that food, vitamin, supplement, whatever it is. And that causes mood, mind, and intestinal or gut related issues, which we know cause a ton of issues, even underlying things that people just live with and don't even realize.
Right.
And so by taking that genetic test, you can just reduce the amount of supplements, take what's right for you, eliminate a lot of mood, mind, gut issues, and really like get energy and clarity back. So that's a complete game changer.
So just out of curiosity, and I want to preface this with, nobody should take this as advice, because like you just said, these supplements are direct to you and based off of the testing that you did. But what are the supplements that you actually take?
I take a multivitamin that's packed with it's a 10X multivitamin. It's packed with a lot of the recommendations that I needed, all in one vitamin. I take a multi-mineral, boron, selenium, a bunch of different minerals. I take L-methionine based on, also my one of my gene breaks as well. And then I take, based on my blood work, to reduce cortisol and to increase my DHEA, I take DHEA. And then the last supplement I take is called Tongkat Ali. And I think there's a lot of misinformation out there about who should take this and how, it's considered a testosterone booster. But I took it and I take it still because my free testosterone was getting bound up in my liver. I'll explain. There's a few readings of testosterone in your body. There's your total testosterone, how much your body produces. Then there's your free testosterone, which is how much your body utilizes. My body naturally produces almost 1,100 testosterone. That's like an 18-year-old kid. It's extremely high. It's like what people would consider optimized. My free testosterone as of 2.5, 3 years ago was very low, meaning my body wasn't utilizing it. There was a marker that we see in my body called sex binding globulin hormone, which was through the roof. And what that means is that my testosterone was getting bound up and my body wasn't utilizing it. By taking the Tongkat Ali and the DHEA together, it actually helped my body start to convert and utilize the testosterone that it was producing. And now I'm optimal in both areas. So it didn't raise my total testosterone, it just helped me utilize more of what my body was already producing. And so
Gotcha.
that's my stack. And again, that's based on my genetic test and my blood test.
Yeah, most people probably think that if you take Tonkat Ali, it just everything goes up, but it's more
It
so the
can.
use of.
Yeah, so it can have different effects for different people. There's, I've seen people take it that have gone from like a 400 to a 600 in total testosterone. It can function different in different people's body. It didn't raise my total testosterone, but in combination with DHEA, it helped me utilize more of what I was producing.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned like you should get the blood test done. You should get the test done because everybody's different. Because for a while I was seeing a ton of information on ashwagandha and everyone's like, this is the best supplement. And I took it and I hated it. I started to become anxious. I couldn't sleep. It just totally wrecked me. It did not do well with my body. Whereas like things like maca powder was like pretty helpful. And I thought for the longest time I had low testosterone and I went and got it tested and it wasn't low. It was like I think in the 700-800s
Yep.
for I believe total or free testosterone, but my bioavailable was close to 400. So it was almost like using half of it. So I was like, oh, okay, I don't have low testosterone. Now I have to figure this out. And I had gut issues. So it was actually a gut problem. So
Yeah.
I love this message of like you need to test these things. You can't just go off of other people's informations and pop a bunch of supplements and hope that it kind of works for you. Right.
That's the key, right? Without proper diagnostic, without understanding your own body, you're just shooting in the dark.
Yeah.
This everybody's different. And so we need to treat what we do to our body based on the results of the testing that's available.
Love that. Let's shift a little bit towards the mind and business. What would you say are some habits that you've had to incorporate on your way to becoming more successful?
Yeah. So number one is going to bed earlier and stopping the use of my phone and Instagram about 45 minutes to an hour before bed. Getting off that screen is paramount for me. And then waking up at the same time every morning. I wake up at 5:15 every morning. That doesn't matter if I have visitors in town. It doesn't matter if I'm up till 1 a.m. It doesn't matter if I'm sick. It doesn't matter if I'm tired. I do it anyway. If I'm that exhausted and I have had minimal sleep, I'll take a nap later in the day or I'll just go to bed early the next night. For the most part, I go to bed at 10 o'clock. I'm in bed at 9:30 and I'm asleep by 10. But I wake up at 5:15 every day. And what that does more than anything for my mind and that discipline is it helps my mental fortitude. It actually helps give me confidence. It gives me time in the morning to be able to prime my day. Like Tony Robbins talked about this years ago. When we wake up, we're not necessarily in the happiest state, right? We don't have enough oxygen and we don't wake up laughing or really with a ton of energy. We need to prime ourselves to be able to run our day instead of our days running us. And so I have a bulletproof routine and I never, ever miss this. I wake up at 5:15. I'm spiritual, so I pray. And then the first thing I do is I drink that LMNT water. Then I sit down in the chair and I read a page or two of one of the many motivational, mindfulness, stoic, whatever books that I want. And I get some sort of positive information into my brain. And then I meditate silently for 10 minutes. Once I'm done that, I go for a walk. And on that walk, I ask to be grateful. And I try and have gratitude for my life and everything in it and try not to take these certain things for granted. I think I spent most of my life chasing material items, thinking that would provide me happiness, and it left me very empty. And so I know through a lot of stoicism and practice that, desiring what I already have is a key to happiness and fulfillment. And so having gratitude on this morning walk, and also getting outside, being able to touch the earth, getting first light, and doing some breath exercises on my way. That's been super helpful for me. And then when I come back, I just hit my DMs and my emails for 30, 45 minutes. And then I get a hard stop at 7:45 and I go to the gym. And I don't miss, and I'm at the gym at 8, and I hit that workout no matter what, no matter how tired I am, how I feel. And then I'm in a very oxygenated state. My endorphins are pumping. I feel very accomplished. And by 9 o'clock, 9:30, I'm back, and I've already been up for 4 hours, and I've completely prepped my day and my life. And so that routine for me has been massive.
Yeah, you've basically just dominated your day before people are waking up.
Exactly. You know, there's nothing that's going to come at me that's really going to throw me too much for a loop. I already did all the hard stuff.
Yeah. So why the meditation app? Where did that come from?
So one of my good friends who actually, so I had this crew, and unfortunately, out of, you know, the people that got addicted to Oxycontin, many of them didn't make it, and some of them ended up in jail, and some of them are still, you know, out on the streets. But two of us made it, and one of them is still my best friend today. He developed a really heavy meditation practice, and his father, who's been extremely successful in many areas, said that meditation was one of the most important pieces to his life in terms of overall success. And so he went on a bunch of retreats, and he worked with this guy Shinzen, and he started becoming really deep into meditation. And I just noticed, you know, from drug addicts and kind of like little heathens as kids to, like, you know, a couple of years later, the kid was just so far ahead of me in every area and just so much more advanced. And I was like, shit, I want to be, you know, more like you. And so he started recommending some stoicism, and then he started teaching me about meditation. And I was like, wow, this could be powerful, but I have ADHD. I can't quiet my mind. And he's like, dude, that's not what it is at all. It's observing your thoughts and then rearranging the way that you listen to your thoughts and how you know, what you choose to do with your thoughts. And I was like, all right, man, well, teach me. And so he started teaching me about meditation. And then he was like, hey, let's go to Toronto. Let's work on this app. And, you know, so I spent a little bit of time with him there, and I started to learn more and more, and with his business partners. And as they developed the app, you know, he would let me utilize all the lessons all the way through, you know, from all the teachings. And it made this really profound impact on my life, and helped me with emotional intelligence, and with being less reactive. I was a very, very reactive person, and I had less outbursts by doing the meditation. And I also felt calmer. And so anyway, it was really him. You know, his name's Christian, and he taught me how to meditate. So that's how it came about.
Love that. What are some books that you would recommend entrepreneurs to read that
Oh,
you personally like change your life?
yeah. So depends on exactly where you are in the life cycle of business. But crazy how The Power of Now changed my life. The Power of Now and Atomic Habits are like foundations for anyone, whether it's business or life, but really in business, those helped me out quite a bit. Your Next 5 Moves by Patrick Bet-David was really important for me, you know, where I was, I would say 5 years ago. The Almanac of Naval Ravikant about happiness and wealth creation is fantastic. I also love Smarter, Better, Faster. I think it's by Charles Duhigg. That was a really cool business book. And then, you know, like the Traction, you know, Traction is a good way to like be able to structure a base level business. Obviously, when you're above 25 million in a larger business, it's harder to use that. But for anybody, you know, in a lesser revenue business, Traction's a really good way to structure your business. And then there's a book called They Ask, You Answer, which is one of the most amazing ways to help people with their marketing message, define their buyer persona, and combine their sales and marketing department in one way, so that instead of competing or fighting against each other, they tightly wrap sales and marketing into one bucket, and then they wrap operations into that to create a really nice business flywheel that's cohesive amongst all units, so that the marketing message is the same thing that the salespeople are saying, and that same service or product is what's being delivered to the customer. And then we continue to market to them so that they refer and bring people back to the top of the flywheel. So those are the books that I found super useful.
Great books. What did you wish that you knew before you started businesses that everyone can take before they start one or even scale one? The one
Um,
biggest lesson.
Emotional intelligence and executive communication are massive, because it's not too difficult to learn about sales, marketing, finance, operations, and then put those into practice. Yes, it takes some time, but managing people is by far and away the most difficult task in business. And it's very rare to have an employee that cares as much about the company as any business owner or entrepreneur. In fact, most of them don't care, and they really shouldn't care. So creating a structure in business to show an employee how they can mature within the business and reach their own personal, professional, financial goals as a part of this organization is a way to create a really strong, cohesive culture. And so people management skills, emotional intelligence, and executive communication are paramount. And that's where I made many early mistakes through communication and lack of EI.
Love that. Amazing lesson. What I like to switch into here as we come to the end is do rapid fire. Whatever just comes to your mind, first word, first sentence, kind of get it out. What are 3 traits or words your friends would use to describe you?
Motivating, motivating, energetic, charismatic.
Love that. What are 3 positive traits that you feel like you want to work on or you feel like is missing?
Empathy.
I laugh at that because every entrepreneur I talk to, empathy is the first thing that comes up.
Yeah, empathy number 1. I think my communication style with certain personality types, non-driver personality types, I can really work on being softer, and I guess that's kind of a part of empathy, but communication style for sure. And patience.
Love that. What is your greatest fear?
Not living up to my potential.
Love it. What's the last book you read and why did you read it?
What did I just read? It's Wes Watson's book called Penitentiary Life, or GP Penitentiary Life. I read it because this guy is one of the most incredible individuals I ever met. He's got an amazing story, but he was on a prison yard for 10 years, and he basically ran the prison yard. And instead of looking at his 10-year sentence as a death sentence, he decided that he was going to become the most unstoppable person that he possibly could. And he became incredibly fit, incredibly healthy, incredibly well-read, incredibly mindful, spiritual, and he helped other people overcome their vices and issues through this bulletproof mindset. And so reading his story about how he developed this mindset and implemented it was just incredible. And that I wanted to understand his mindset because I never met anyone like the guy.
Love it. What's the best quote or one quote that you live by?
No situation in life is good or bad. That's just a judgment a person puts on a situation. We don't know how useful the situation may be until far in the future. So we just have to view everything as it is.
Love it. Is religion important or not important, and why?
I grew up going to church. I personally am very spiritual. I have cultivated a relationship with God through prayer, meditation, and helping other people. I don't personally find that organized religion is needed to be spiritual or to develop a relationship with one's conception of God.
Love it. Last 2 questions. These are a little bit more fun. What animal would you pick as your spirit animal?
Oh, man, I would go with the tiger.
Tiger. I like it. And what's one superpower you would pick?
Oh, to be able to fly.
Fly. Love it. Dude, wait, thank you so much for hopping on. Everybody who's listening to this, you might have to replay this because tons in there for just mindset in business, but also just health, living a good, happy, fulfilled life. if people want to know more about you, what you do, seeing your content, where can they find you?
Instagram is the best place. It's just my name. It's Wade Houston. And that's
Cool.
where I share everything and respond to all messages. So, if you DM me, it's me responding.
Sweet. Awesome. Thank you for hopping on. We'll stay on for a minute or two. Hope everyone here got a ton of value.